I Abandoned This Life by Joshua Criss. Never tell a child you have a soul. Teach him you are a soul. You have a body. Scottish minister George MacDonald, 1892. Steve Kranowitz sits at his wobbly kitchen table and holds up the .357 Magnum bullet that will blow his brains out, thinking the cartridge was longer than he remembered. It had been years since he'd touched the revolver or its ammo. He'd bought the gun for home defense after moving into this basement apartment so long ago, and kept it fully loaded in a nightstand beside the bed for the first couple of years. But after he'd met Brianna and she'd started spending the night, he had returned the gun to its plastic case and hidden it under a pile of long-ignored sweaters in his bedroom closet. Brianna often showed up after drinking too much, having traded sloppy goodbyes with her girlfriends at some bar downtown, and he didn't want her finding the gun during one of her aggressive rants. Their relationship had lasted a tumultuous year and a half. When she told him she had started seeing someone else, he had tried to keep his relief from being obvious, figuring a blank expression was safest, but the lack of reaction was enough in itself. She had glared at him a few seconds, then given an exaggerated shrug. "You know what, Steve?" she'd started, flinging open a kitchen cabinet and grabbing the bottles of vodka, one half empty, one unopened, she'd put there just 2 days before. "Go ahead and stay a loser, it's what you're best at." Then she'd roughly pushed past him and left, slamming the door as he knew she would. He hadn't bothered to ask for his apartment key, thinking he would just change the lock in the days ahead, but in the 6 years or so since, he never had. Now, sitting at his table, staring at the bullet between thumb and forefinger, he smirks. That Brianna was a loser herself, having married and divorced the new guy within 2 years after leaving Steve, then charged with embezzling from the municipal office where she worked a year after that, didn't make her parting assessment any less valid. At 54, there was no denying he had failed in every aspect of his life. He felt close to no one. He could count the number of dates since Brianna on one hand and still have fingers remaining. At the shipping materials plant where he'd worked since his late 20s, he'd been demoted to part-time 7 years ago and had no skills that could take him elsewhere. There was nothing left to look forward to. It was all meaningless, a world filled with petty cruelties and other symptoms of human frailty, where everyone was merely finding ways to pass time before the end. So what did it really matter when that end came? Steve tilts the cartridge so that the bullet faces him directly. It was hollow point, so it would fold inside out and mushroom for maximum damage as it went through the roof of his mouth and whatever brittle bones rest above, through his brain, and punched out the back of his skull. Traveling just under a quarter mile per second, it would be soaring above the trees before he'd had the chance to register the slightest twinge of pain. He wouldn't even hear the shot. Less than an hour later, he's walking through the woods toward the spot where Champ had been buried 35 years ago. Back then, Steve was 19 and still living at home. He and his mom had come out here and buried the dog together. At the time, it was unposted land where Steve and his friends had spent afternoons sneaking beers and shooting BB guns. Now, the short road leading to the start of the trail was gated, and there were private property, no trespassing signs on both the gate and trees to either side. Steve had pulled his car up to the gate and left it there amidst the weeds, key in the ignition, stepping past the gate and onto the trail with his old backpack drooped over his shoulder. He tries to focus on moving forward rather than what he's about to do, muttering in response to his own fear. "It's only as big a deal as you make it," he says, feet crunching over leaves and twigs. "How long did you want to keep going like this? Fucking relax, it won't hurt." Still, only after a minute, he pauses to set the backpack down, pulls a bottle of vodka from it, and takes 2 full gulps. His heart is pounding, and it isn't from the hike. He stands there until he feels his chest and shoulders loosen, then takes another swig. He gazes around. The trail had gotten far less defined over the years with the land gated and posted, but he knows he'll have no trouble finding Champ's grave. Within a few hundred yards, the trail will open to a round clearing, and there's a moss-covered boulder at about the 2 o'clock position at the edge of that clearing, and the dog rests behind that boulder. His mom had wanted some kind of marker, but Steve had insisted there be none, thinking some kid as aimless and angry as himself might see it and disturb the grave. He hadn't explained his reasoning, and his mom hadn't asked, just lit another cigarette within a few seconds of the last one. Steve reaches the clearing, which is smaller than he remembered, and sees the boulder immediately. It looked exactly the same. He takes a deep breath and starts toward it, thinking that in a few minutes he'll be as dead and non-sentient as the rock itself. "Shut up," he hisses reflexively. He moves to the far side of the boulder and sits down against it, setting aside the backpack and patting the ground with his non-bottle hand. "Been a while, huh, champ?" he says, immediately starting to cry, not surprised, not caring. He'd spent most of his adult life not finding anything worth crying over, but in recent years has come to shed tears over anything. "I never forgot about you, I hope you know that." He lets himself cry a bit, wiping his eyes with a sweatshirt sleeve before taking a swig. He starts to put the bottle down, changes his mind, drinks again. He exhales heavily. If there is an afterlife, which he very much doubts, he hopes to see Champ there. Aside from that, he couldn't think of anyone. There's no point in drawing things out, but he supposes he should say something. It's the way he'd pictured it. He leans the bottle against the rock and unzips the front of his backpack, pulls out the revolver. Closing his eyes, he presses the gun flat against his chest and takes another deep breath. "I've pretty much failed at everything I ever tried," he starts, near tears again, this time fighting them. It was understandable to cry for your long-lost pet, pathetic to cry for yourself. And I never amounted to anything. I lived my whole life afraid to take chances, afraid to care about anyone, afraid of looking stupid. They say a coward dies 1,000 times, but a brave man only once. I've died 1,000,000 times, and look where all that fear and caution got me. He lifts the bottle and takes a large swallow. No need to worry about a hangover. The good part is, it doesn't fucking matter. Nothing does. I couldn't live by example, but I do know that love is the only thing that's important. He sighs, staring into the quiet woods leading up the mountain and out of sight. What was the point of this maudlin monologue? Nothing was listening. Not God, not Champ. But since it made no difference, he might as well continue. He sees a squirrel braced upside down on a tree some 20 feet up the hill, watching him, and stares back for a while. "I'm sorry for all the dumb things I did," he says finally. "All the critters like you I shot for no reason, just 'cause I was a bored and unhappy kid." He pauses for another drink, sees the bottle is only about 1/4 finished. It was still hitting him hard, and it takes effort to regain his last thought. The squirrel hasn't moved. "If I could take it back, I would, but I can't. I guess all I can do is show I'm sorry by doing the same thing to myself." He sets the bottle down, immediately feeling his heart race in spite of the booze. "Don't overthink it," he tells himself. "You won't feel a thing." "Love," he says aloud. He wanted it to be his last word. He opens his mouth and raises the gun, holding it upside down and sticking the short barrel between his lips. His heart feels like it's about to come out of his chest. His finger wraps around the trigger, but pulling it seems impossible as walking off a 1,000-foot ledge. He thinks about all the countless men in all the countless wars who were shot involuntarily, who charged into battle facing their fates more bravely than he ever would. Okay. He pulls the hammer back with his thumb, angles the gun so it's pointing out the back of his head and slightly up. He takes a deep breath and holds it, squeezes his eyes shut, and pulls the trigger. He'd been tensed so rigidly he hadn't even heard a click, though there must have been one. Steve opens his eyes to the same scene as before, though the squirrel that had been watching him is gone. Dazed, he lets out the breath he figured would be his last, lowering the gun and depressing the lever that allows the cylinder to swing open. It was empty. Empty! Though he'd rehearsed 6 times, verified the cylinder rotated counterclockwise when the hammer came back, and placed a single hollow point bullet in exactly the right chamber only an hour ago. He must have removed it during the last rehearsal. All this tearful drama, his cliched last words, the heart-pounding stress, and he'd walked out of his house with an empty gun. It was either absurd stupidity or unconsciously deliberate, He hadn't wanted it after all. Steve slumps against the rock. He couldn't even end his own life without fucking things up. So what now? He would have to go home, grab the bullet that was likely resting on his kitchen table, and do all of this again. Maybe he should just do it at home as soon as the gun was loaded. He would also have to drive after all that vodka, and didn't want to be stopped on the way home and spend the rest of the day in a holding cell. Speaking of which, he no longer felt all that vodka, not even slightly. He reaches for the bottle, but it's no longer there, even when he gets to his knees and searches the immediate area. His backpack is gone as well. "What the fuck?" he says aloud. He reaches up and rubs the back of his head, feeling for any wound, thinking he might be injured and in some kind of confused shock. He feels nothing and his hand comes back clean. He lifts the gun again to inspect it. He'd bought it used and at a discount because it had a deep scrape on its wooden grip. At the time, he thought he would replace the grip with a modern composite, but of course never had. Now he turns the pistol over and sees the scrape is gone, the wood gleaming and new. He sniffs the cylinder and bore, smelling nothing to indicate it had ever been fired. Steve gets to his feet, sets the pistol atop the boulder, and gazes upward. The sky has changed. He can no longer discern clouds or even tell where the sun is. Everything beyond the treetops is pale monotone in every direction. A strong breeze comes, warm and comfortable, as if from some tropical place. He scans for the squirrel he'd seen before, or any squirrel, bird, or chipmunk, but sees nothing, not even a bug. There are no animal noises from anywhere. He reaches toward the pistol with growing unease. It's gone. A quick search verifies it hasn't slid off the rock, is nowhere on the surrounding ground. The entire clearing suddenly feels foreign, staged. It may look like the place he hiked out to a few minutes ago, but it's not. He's somewhere else. He looks up again and now sees a lone crow atop the tallest pine. It's perched sideways, maybe 100 feet away, one black, glassy eye in his direction, but he's not sure it's looking at him. He stares at it a long while, sees and hears no other living creatures, eventually calls up to it for lack of a better idea. "Hello?" he tries, then holds out his hands when there's no answer. "Can you understand me? Do you know why I'm here?" "Your last life has ended," says a perfectly clear voice. It hadn't traveled through the air or entered his ears, but he knows it came from the crow perched above. It's a male voice, calm and pleasant. "I really did shoot myself then?" Steve calls up. "I died?" "Yes." Steve exhales. "Where am I now?" "You are in a temporary place." "What place? Why am I here?" No answer, only wind riffling through the branches. "Can you still hear me?" "Yes." "What do I do now?" "That is up to you." "I don't understand. If I'm dead, what's next?" "That is up to you." "Mr. Crow, I don't even know where I am. Do I get to see God?" No answer. The crow adjusts itself against a breeze that sways the treetops. "Are you God?" "No." "Then who is?" No answer. "When you say it's up to me, what do you mean?" "You can request scenarios in which to live. Once there, you are bound by them until you choose to leave." "Scenarios? Can you tell me what that means?" "You can choose times, places, and conditions in which to live. Once there, you are bound by your selections until you choose to leave." "Leave where?" "The scenario in which you have chosen to live." "And where do I go after that?" "Here, or in another interim place of your choosing." "So that's where I am now? An interim place?" "Yes." Steve looks around at the silent trees and rising hillside. "Why did I end up here?" "This is where your last life ended." "Last life? Did I have other lives before that one?"
"No."
"Could I go back to that life if I wanted? I'm not saying I do," he adds quickly.
"No."
A pause. "What is the meaning of all this? Of life? Why are we even on Earth to begin with?" The crow says nothing, just gazes out over the treetops. Steve raises his arms, lets them drop. It's kind of assumed that we get answers to these questions when we die, he says. Can't you tell me anything more than I already know? The bird adjusts its position on the branch, and Steve is afraid it's about to fly off, but it stays put and silent. Okay, Steve says finally. What do I do now? You can choose times, places, and conditions in which to live. Once there, you are bound by your selections until you choose to leave. So I get to choose another life? That is one way to define it. How long will it last? It will last until you die or choose to leave it. I can leave the new life anytime I want? Yes. How do I do that? Form a mental image of me and say, I abandon this life. I abandon this life, Steve whispers, thinking that was pretty much what he just did. And then I come back here? Yes. Steve begins pacing. Can I set up my next life just the way I want it then? In any time and place? You can choose times, places, and conditions in which to live. Once there, you are bound by your selections until you choose to leave. Okay, he mutters. Where to begin? I had a girlfriend in high school, he thinks aloud, still pacing. In my junior year. It didn't last long, but it was the only time I remember being happy, being excited about a relationship. He pauses and looks up, expecting some kind of conversational response, and continues when there is none. It was my fault it didn't work. I was too insecure back then, always jealous and afraid she would lose interest in me and find someone else. I always thought if I'd just been more mature, we would have stayed together, and maybe the rest of my life could have been happy. He looks up at the crow and spreads his arms to make it clear he doesn't know what else to say. Her name was Darcy French, the crow says, in its clear and silent voice. You met her on November 5th, 1985, and began your relationship on November 8th, 1985. Wow, that's right. I'm not sure about those dates, but you must be right. He stops pacing. So I should probably get there a month or so before the start of my junior year. Maybe August 1985? August 1, 1985, Littleton, New Hampshire. What are your conditions? Conditions? You have set the time and place. Now you can select the conditions of your next life. I can set up everything the way I want it to be? Yes. He feels dizzy with possibilities. Well, I remember Darcy lived at 52 Peach Street in Littleton. Could I maybe live in the house next door? 50 Peach Street or 54 Peach Street? Gosh, I don't know. Whichever one was newer and in better shape. 50 Peach Street, the crow declares. And can I live alone? Steve adds hastily. I don't want my parents in the house or even my sisters. Yes. If you prefer, none of those people will exist. I do prefer. No offense to them, he says, thinking of his closest sister. But this will be easier without relatives. As for his parents, he didn't care if they took offense or not. What about money? He adds. No answer. I'll need money, of course. Can I have a lot of cash? Be specific, the crow says, as a breeze ruffles its feathers. Okay, how about 200,000? No, let's make it $500,000 in 20s and 50s. And it's right there for me in the house. $500,000 in 20s and 50s will be in the house. Thank you so much, he blurts, thinking it sounds stupid. And could you make me taller? I was always too goddamn short. Sorry. Could you make me 5'10" or so? You will be 5 feet 10 inches tall. Oh man, Steve says, lifting a hand to his forehead. This is crazy. Wait, I'll need a car, right? I could drive when I was 16. He pauses. Will I really be 16 again? Yes. He feels a rush of excitement, of unlimited opportunity. I want a really cool car then. What was the fastest car back in 1985? Production car, I mean. Street legal. The Ferrari Testarossa. No, that would be absurd for a teenager, right? How much did it cost back then? $87,000. Yeah, forget it then. What was the second fastest production car? The Porsche 911 Carrera. No, not a Porsche either. I don't want to draw that much attention. Steve paces. How about BMW? Did they have cars back in 1985?
Yes.
What was their fastest production model?
The M635 CSI with 286 horsepower.
How much did that go for? The sticker price?
$57,382.
Oh boy, he grimaces, then waves his reservations away. You know what? Let's go with that one. In black, two-door if they have it.
You will have the BMW M635 CSI Luxury Coupe in black.
Okay, wait, is there anything else I need? He suddenly feels very afraid. How will I live day to day? What about utilities and property taxes and all that? Who will take care of those things?
All utilities and the deed to the house will be in your name.
Will I have a driver's license?
Yes, as you did at that time.
Steve takes a deep breath. Can you give me a rundown of everything we've set up?
August 1, 1985. Littleton, New Hampshire. You are 16 years old. You live alone in a house at 50 Peach Street, next door to Darcy French. The parents and sisters you had in your previous life do not exist in this one. You are 5 feet 10 inches tall. The house contains $500,000, half of which is in $20 bills and the other half in $50 bills. Your car is a 1985 BMW M635 CSI Luxury Coupe in black. You are licensed to drive it. The car, house, and all utilities are in your name.
Yeah, okay, he nods. Look, I don't want to sound greedy, but if this life is going to be as perfect as it sounds, I'll probably end up spending the rest of it with Darcy. Decades, right? He waits for a comment or answer, then continues. So I should have more money. 500,000 won't last us forever. He forces a smile. So how about there's 4 million in the house, in 20s and 50s? He stares up hopefully, afraid the crow will scold him or worse, fly away without another word. But the answer is immediate.
The house contains $4 million, half of which is in $20 bills and the other half in $50 bills.
Wow, thank you. Sorry it took me a while to figure out. This is all happening so fast.
Are you ready to begin, Steve Kranowitz?
Wait a second, he says quickly, afraid again. How did you say I could get back here?
You will return here if you die, or if you form a mental image of me and say, I abandon this life.
Right, I remember now, Steve says. I appreciate everything, I really do. He takes a deep breath, then another. I'm scared, is that normal? No answer. Okay, I guess I'm ready. Part 1. The Boy Next Door. August 1985.